Hey everybody, Matt here from the iWall with an update for you on Hurricane Lee. Lee continues to meander as a major hurricane out there over the open ocean. Right now showing winds of about 120 miles an hour. It has been up and down for the last couple of days. It was down yesterday, back up late yesterday, up today. Now kind of going through what we call an iWall replacement cycle earlier today. So that has weakened it a little bit, but it has also expanded the wind field by quite a bit. So Lee is now becoming a little bit of a larger storm, which is important because that will sort of have an impact on what happens as Lee comes to the north. And you can see the forecast track here from the National Hurricane Center showing you that Lee does come to the north and heads up and off the East Coast and eventually lands somewhere between southern New England and the Canadian Maritimes. What we were hoping for was that Lee would find a way out to sea. It does not look like that exit door is going to be open wide enough at this point for Lee to leave. So now the question becomes, what happens in terms of impacts in parts of the Northeast U.S., New England, and Atlantic Canada? And so let's talk a little bit about that as we go through here. We'll talk a little bit about what the timing could be, as well as what some of the impacts could be as this comes to the north. But, again, just notice that this stays comfortably offshore. And also notice the water temperatures here. If you look close, you can see the different colors here. The darker reds and oranges down here indicate warmer waters. The yellows and greens indicate slightly cooler waters. And then as you get up into the North Atlantic, you start to see slightly cooler water. So Lee still actually has a fair bit of time over fairly warm water. So it's going to weaken, but it's not going to weaken that fast, we don't think, as this comes to the north. So by the time it gets into the far North Atlantic and starts to impact land, it will still probably be a hurricane. And its intensity, albeit weaker than what it is now, will still be significant. And because of the size of Lee, that will help to impart a larger field of impacts across a broader area than we would see otherwise if Lee were just more of a compact storm like it has been up until about this point. But let's talk more about some of the uncertainties and some of the impacts. First, let's talk a little bit about the track spread here. And this has been a graph that I've showed a lot on our site from Tomer Berg, graduate student at the University of Oklahoma, that I really like because it indicates within the ensembles, again, you take a weather model. What we often see shown are these one singular model runs that show some sort of biblical catastrophe for someone when it comes to hurricanes. But in reality, the ensembles are a better tool because you take the model, you run it multiple different times with some tweaks in the early initialization period, and then you just let it go and you get 50, 30 different outcomes, all sorts of different outcomes. And so when we put all the ensembles from all the different models together, as Tomer does here, you get a little bit more of a widespread. And what you see here now is confidence in the track up to about this point now. This is where the reds and oranges start to fade more to yellow and green. And this is where I would have high confidence that the storm tracks. From there, it becomes a little bit more of a widespread, which includes most of Nova Scotia. It does include part of Maine. It includes New Brunswick and Canada. And it does just barely include Cape Cod and maybe Nantucket as well. So we have to watch exactly where Lee goes because it could fall anywhere within this realm of possibilities as it comes to the north. And there's always a chance that it could fall outside the realm of that possibility as well. But if we're looking for the most likely outcome, the most likely scenario right now, Lee will come to the north and eventually get pretty close to Nova Scotia or down East Maine. So those are the two areas, and New Brunswick, three areas that I would watch closest from Lee's potential impacts as this comes to the north. Now, as Lee does move north, it will, like we said, weaken, but it will still have a very expansive wind field, meaning there will be wind spread out over a large area. So it will be important for folks preparing in New England, eastern New England, northern New England, Atlantic Canada, to kind of understand when those winds will get here. And this is the most likely time, arrival time of tropical storm force winds. So this is kind of a rough gauge of how long you have. Once these tropical storm winds get there, that's it. You really need to start hunkering down and be wherever you're going to be for the storm. At that point, your preparations pretty much have to be complete. So Saturday morning is when we start to expect to see the potential for tropical storm force winds getting north of Boston into coastal Maine, into Nova Scotia, and into New Brunswick. That would be about the time that I would plan today to start to have our preparations done by. So if you're thinking about preparing for the storm, as you should be in coastal New England as well as Atlantic Canada, you need to have what you're going to do done by the time we get to Friday night or Saturday morning, because at that point, conditions will start to go downhill pretty quickly. As Lee comes to the north, Obviously, the wind is going to be an issue with Lee kind of maintaining hurricane strength. We'll probably see some sustained hurricane force winds somewhere, depending on Lee's exact track and the exact orientation of what Lee looks like at that point. We'll also see some tropical storm force winds over a large area. And, people say, well, Lee weakens. Well, yes, but tropical storm force winds can cause damage, especially in places like New England where trees can be uprooted easily, power lines knocked down easily. These are all things that we're going to be watching as Lee comes to the north. And I would plan on the potential for prolonged power outages, depending on exactly where Lee comes in, be it Maine, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, somewhere in there. That would be an area that I would watch. Not only that, so you've got the wind aspect of things. You're also going to be talking about heavy rain. That's something I don't want to get too into details about at this point. But as Lee comes north, it will be accelerating, fortunately, but it will still be capable of producing heavy rain and causing some significant flooding in at least some areas. Hopefully not over a wide area, but we'll have to wait and see on that. More on that through the week. The other thing is Lee's going to be carrying a lot of surf. As Lee grows in size, it's going to take all these waves that it's churned up, all the swells that it's churned up in the Atlantic, and just kind of bring them to the north and bring them up the coast. And you're going to start to see some significant waves. I think, wherever Lee comes in, that is what concerns me the most at this point, is how much water it's going to bring with it, especially in a place like this where you have some very volatile tidal departures historically. It's normal for tides to be kind of crazy up in this area. You really have to watch the water from this storm as it comes to the north, because Lee will be a large storm spatially in size, and it will be carrying a lot of significant waves with it. So coastal Maine, coastal New England, really all of coastal New England needs to watch that aspect of things, as well as Atlantic Canada. You need to be prepared. South and east facing shores will probably bear the brunt of some of the surge and the beach erosion and the rough surf from Hurricane Lee as it comes to the north. So, I don't want folks to be kind of lulled into complacency. Well, it was a Category 5 and now it's going to barely be a Category 1 when it gets here. Northeast storms don't work this way. They work a little bit differently than what you expect elsewhere, and it takes a lower threshold sometime of storm to cause more significant impacts, especially when you're talking about a storm the size of Lee. Remember, Hurricane Sandy technically wasn't a hurricane, but if it were, it would have been a Category 1 storm. And look how much damage that caused in parts of New York and New Jersey as that came up the coast. So you cannot disrespect these lower end storms as they come up, especially ones like Lee that have a history of being rather significant and will be carrying a lot of water with them. So a lot to stew on as we go through the week. We'll keep you posted through the week as well, and we'll let you know what changes and what to expect as we get a little bit closer. In the meantime, visit theiwall.com for more. Take care.